Dead of Night is a British supernatural horror anthology series first broadcast on BBC Two in 1972, from the 5th of November to the 17th of December, lasting 7 episodes. It was produced by Innes Lloyd, also known for his work on Doctor Who, Talking Heads, the completely missing soap opera United, and 30-Minute Theatre. The series has no relation to the 1945 horror fantasy film of the same name, although it is rumoured to have borrowed the title directly from the film. Dead of Night is considered by some to be a spiritual successor to an earlier horror anthology for the BBC, also shown on BBC Two, Late Night Horror. Like Late Night Horror, Dead of Night ran for a single series in autumn, offering one-off horror plays each week, and was created during an era where horror anthologies and ghost stories were especially popular, particularly in the UK. Another now famous 90-minute programme that survived destruction made by the Dead of Night production team under Innes Lloyd, The Stone Tape, was intended to be the 8th episode, but was not broadcast under the Dead of Night banner, instead broadcast on Christmas Day as a standalone Christmas science supernatural teleplay. As such, it has often been misreported as having originally been intended as part of the annual A Ghost Story for Christmas banner, but this is untrue. According to the booklet accompanying the BFI's DVD release of the story in 2013, Lloyd had intended for the show to lack gothic elements, such as strange noises at night and people in fancy sheets. While one would hate to disagree with such a talented producer, Dead of Night does contain some of these elements, especially in a woman sobbing. One could argue, however, the main idea of the show was to critique the habitat lifestyle, which was made rather obvious in the script for Bedtime, the 3rd episode of the series. But other times they almost sympathise with the same habitat lifestyle livers, struggling in unhappy relationships with unfulfilling partners, particularly the women featured in the plays. Most interestingly, however, is that of Dead of Night's 7 50-minute episodes, only 3, The Exorcism, Return Flight, and A Woman Sobbing, are known to remain in the BBC's archives as their original 625-line colour videotapes. Only The Exorcism has ever been rebroadcast, which occurred on the 22nd of December 2007 on BBC 4. The original master videotapes for Bedtime, Death Cancels All Debts, Smith, and 2 in the Morning were wiped, and all known black and white film copies appear to have been destroyed. Here is an exploration of the surviving episodes, as well as what survives of the other 4. Each episode opens on a blood-red negative image of a tracking shot in the woods, accompanied by the unnerving sound of footsteps running and cold, harsh wind blowing, before abruptly cutting off to the black screen with Dead of Night in white on the screen. It's unknown if the original film elements exist for these titles, but the quality appears to be fairly good, even if it is just the telesigned version of the videotape. In The Exorcism, a wealthy middle-class couple Rachel, Anna Cropper, and Edmund, Edward Petherbridge, have just moved into their new cottage in the middle of the country, and have invited their friends and fellow couple Margaret, Sylvia Kay, and Dan, Clive Swift, for Christmas dinner. However, as the evening progresses, increasingly disturbing things happen to the couples. For example, Edmund believes the wine tastes like blood, and all 4 of them suffer excruciating but short-lived pain after eating the food. Not long after that, they realise that the outside has become complete blackness, and they can't open the windows or doors.
It won't budge. Help me to shoulder it.
Something is going on, but what? In case anyone was wondering, no, this play doesn't really have anything in common with the 1973 film The Exorcist. The Exorcism does predate William Friedkin's movie, but it doesn't predate the real 1940s Ronald Edwin Hunkeler case, or the 1971 book the film was based on. They're both very different stories and stand on their own just fine, even if The Exorcist is, without a single doubt, far superior in every way. But this isn't a comparison piece, so I'll just leave it there. The production was directed by Don Taylor, based on one of his own plays which he continued to adapt for the stage various times, most notably for a tour in 1983. It was also adapted into a radio play in 1992. The TV episode was rehearsed and recorded across 2 days entirely in studio in April 1972, really capturing the drawing room feel it was originally written for. As such, the production is shot almost entirely on videotape and restricted to the single house setting, with only the dining room, master bedroom, and lounge area being prominently featured. The only time the production really breathes is with pre-filmed insert shots on 16mm colour film for exterior shots of the house at the beginning and at the ending when the police arrive at the house. The original film elements presumably don't exist, and if they do, they weren't utilised for restoration, as the footage is clearly the telesigned film on the videotape. Surprisingly, this is more of a folk horror tale, with the reveal being that the house is in fact haunted by the vengeful spirit of a woman whose family died of starvation and neglect during a cold winter, brought on by the greed of wealthy landowners who ordered the hanging of her husband Robert. This is a reflection of a conversation Edmund and Dan had earlier in the play, where Edmund talks about how they snagged the cottage fairly cheaply, and Dan encourages him not to feel guilt over the rewards of his PR job and enjoy being a rich socialist. The hauntings are cleverly foreshadowed by a comment from Dan's partner Margaret, who remarks she has a feeling of welcoming when she enters the home. God, was she wrong. Although not particularly scary in my opinion, this production does offer some slightly unnerving and chilling moments, such as the more subtle scene where Rachel plays a tune on the piano she didn't even know she could play and becomes distraught by it. Other moments include when the wine tastes like blood.
To me it is.
The food makes them all almost vomit with how hot and disgusting it tastes.
It's a joke. This is the big joke Christmas.
There isn't any joke. I cooked it in the normal way and it tastes like fire.
No.
Oh, it's poisonous.
What's happening here?
It's burning my throat.
Fucking disgusting.
The house starts to shake and things fall apart.
The house is falling down.
Margaret's reaction to the complete blackness outside the windows,
No such thing as absolute darkness, is there? It's never absolutely dark.
and Rachel's horrified reaction to a genuinely terrifying corpse prop. While the performances from Swift, Petherbridge and Kay are believable enough, Anna Cropper steals the show with her performance. Having previously appeared as a schizophrenic in the Wednesday play production In Two Minds, she's obviously familiar with more mentally vulnerable characters, and her highlights are her DVD cover-worthy screaming reaction to seeing a child's bones in her bed, and her 10-minute long monologue where Rachel's mind and body is possessed by the woman, explaining her fury over the situation that led to her and her children's deaths. The exorcism ends on a very dark note, where police arrive and discover the unexplainable deaths of all 4 people in the building, with no sign of foul play and Christmas dinner rather mysteriously left completely untouched. It's worth noting the director, Don Taylor, would go on to direct During Barty's Party, an episode of the previously talked about horror anthology Beasts, which was about a middle-aged couple being terrorised by a strange presence in their countryside home, and they were also an upper-class couple living in the country. So he clearly had a pattern when it came to horror. While it isn't especially scary and relies on performances over visual flair, the script is solid and it almost feels like a Hammer horror film at points. If adapted into a feature-length film with stronger horror content, this could very well be a masterpiece. I'd give this episode a high 7 out of 10. It's pretty great.
How long now, darling?
Not long. Time for a glass of sherry.
Well, we're both green with envy.
Darling, Edmund's having an attack of guilt. They had a traumatic weekend with his father.
Oh, it wasn't that bad.
Captain Hamish Rolfe is a pilot who's readjusting to work after the death of his wife. When he spots a mysterious aircraft and reports it to ground control, however, everyone around him seems to think he's losing his mind, or at the very least is losing his bearings over the profession, which can be extremely dangerous. To be honest, I don't have a lot to say about Return Flight. It is what it says on the tin, a story about grief, but with the psycho-supernatural horror twist of people thinking that you're going crazy when, coincidentally, you start to perform your tasks not as well as you could because of some kind of supernatural interference, which in this case is a World War II Lancaster bomber. Since Rolfe is so stubborn and understandably doesn't want to be made redundant over a simple hallucination, he becomes determined to prove that the sighting was real. It's all very well acted and decently directed, but it lacks the same bone-chilling flair that The Exorcism has, and it just isn't all that fun or even remotely scary.
Can't give that away. What about, Moira? Offered it, doesn't want it.
Characters go here and there, talk about this, and it works much better as an episode of Play for Today with some horror elements, mainly the plane sequences which are at least a bit suspenseful compared to everything else. But this isn't Play for Today, it's Dead of Night.
Ha!
As I said before, the episode primarily focuses on characters just talking. The exorcism and a woman sobbing are very chatty, sure, but with those two it actually plays into the main theme of their scripts and it builds on them. In the exorcism they're talking about financial problems, annoying parents, and various other socially relevant things. which of course plays into the theme of the children and their mother dying in the winter with no food, which is all due to class and economical struggles of their time. On top of that, adding to the tension, each conversation gradually gets more dark, such as when Dan plays a mind test on his wife Margaret, and when Rachel gets spooked after playing the piano, playing on that supernatural theme. And the exorcism doesn't do it for what feels like the whole runtime. It's about 45% of the episode, with the other 55% being the actual scary parts with blood wine, fiery food, and complete blackness.
You tell him it's a guillotine.
What was that noise?
Don't worry, darling. A little practical psychology from
Just
Dan.
my husband frightening the life out of me, quite normal.
In Return Flight, almost 90% of the episode is built on these conversations, and it starts to drag. It's well done, and some of it does play on the episode's themes about occupational grief and haunting memories of a war veteran, but I was expecting something scary or at least unsettling, not an Inspector Calls level of dialogue-driven scenes. I hate to just sit here and talk about why other episodes are better, but I can't help it. Return Flight just isn't something I particularly enjoy talking about, even if overall I do think it's good, still. I liked the ending, even though I saw it coming from about 1,000 miles up in the sky, and it left me feeling suitably a little bit chilly, although it arguably only just makes this a remotely horror-driven experience. One would think that maybe talking about the background of the play is a bit more interesting, given it's not a particularly exciting tale itself. Well, unfortunately, the booklet doesn't really offer all that much information, unlike The Exorcism, which was rich, full of context and backstory. The most notable thing about the behind the scenes of this one is the fact it was written by Doctor Who legend Robert Holmes, who penned such classics as The Crotons, Spearhead from Space, The Time Warrior, The Talons of Weng Chiang, and The Caves of Androzani, becoming the script editor throughout the Tom Baker era and returning to the show during the Peter Davidson and Colin Baker eras before his untimely death in 1986. He would work again with the director of Return Flight, Rodney Bennett, for The Ark in Space, The Sontaran Experiment, and The Mask of Mandragora. I'm giving Return Flight a very generous 6, but if I'm entirely honest, I'm not in a rush to see it again, and it might be bumped down to a 5 if I ever do. I more so respect it for what it was trying to do, as opposed to what it ended up doing, which, like the general public who saw it at the time, confused me.
Oh, I see it. Golf 4 for Bravo, we have visual contact.
Jane is a discontented middle-class wife and mother. One night in her bedroom she hears a woman crying, though her husband hears nothing.
There's no smell of gas in the attic.
Is it a symptom of her depression, or is her home haunted? In her attempts to discover the truth, she becomes increasingly paranoid.
Do you think I'm going mad?
No, I don't think so.
Well, you should.
This one is essentially a contemporary spin on the classic Gothic heroine tale, taking inspiration from 1938's Gaslight. The episode was penned by John Bowen, who by this point in time was well known for his unsettling play-for-today classic Robin Redbreast, which supposedly has similar themes to a woman sobbing. While Nora in Redbreast is younger, independent and more confident, Jane, played by Anna Massey, is the exact opposite, a woman worn out by her years on the verge of a complete psychotic break, only further made worse by the things she hears late at night.
I was reading the Sunday Times magazine section this morning.
You shouldn't leave the Sunday papers lying around all week. It's not healthy.
About men.
From a visual standpoint, this episode has been called beautifully creepy, and I'm inclined to agree. Interior scenes are primarily videotaped, with muted colours and a similar sense of claustrophobia that The Exorcism has, while the exterior scenes are shot on film, and feel more airy and bright, creating a brilliant contrast, and somehow making the whole thing feel a lot more unsettling, like Jane is literally living in two worlds at once.
Jane. Jane. Poor Jane.
There's even a scene where a priest refuses to give in to any potential belief he may have in the supernatural, leaving Jane to resolve her phantom problem alone, as if she's truly going crazy.
But a joke, please ignore it. I am high in the liturgical sense. Your local priest, I understand, has Methodist leanings.
It has a really unsettling and ambiguous ending where it's left unclear as to whether Jane became the sobbing woman, or if she was just hearing a premonition of herself the whole time, further fueled by her uncaring husband's intentional or unintentional gaslighting, especially when he brought a younger, blonder, more attractive woman into the house. According to the original camera script, the ending takes place 30 years later, and the Puller family have long since gone, but another couple is dealing with the same thing, a worn-out married woman who can hear weeping that no man can hear or understand.
Do you hear anything? Philip, do you hear anything? Do you?
Do I hear a woman sobbing? Is that what you mean?
Do you?
No.
I really loved this one. It tackles themes of parental depression, fear of affairs, paranoia, tragedy, mental illness, and, of course, the supernatural hours of the night when it feels most dead. It really is a special piece of supernatural horror that tackles domestic issues of the contemporary 70s time period, and some of its themes are still very much relevant and understandable in today's world. A Woman Sobbing gets a solid 9 out of 10 from me. It's not perfect, and again, it's not even particularly that scary, but the sophistication and ties to modern social anxieties found within the stories is just admirable. I know there's only 3, and only 2 of which I actually have strong admiration for, but I recognise all the effort that went into making this a 7-week run of gothic supernatural terror, even if it wasn't supposed to be exactly that. It's unfortunate that virtually nothing beyond a few photographs and the original camera script survive for the missing episodes, because they all sound like equally dark and intriguing stories. 2 in the Morning was about a doppelganger taking over a depressed man who hates his job's life, and tackled similar themes of workplace anxiety that Return Flight did, and maybe even better. Bedtime was another feminine heroine tale about a woman who feels trapped in her marriage, and soon finds herself unable to remove herself from her brass-framed bed she has become obsessed with. Death Cancels All Debts was about a world-famous writer who becomes convinced he will die soon due to the fact he uncontrollably wakes up at 4:20 in the morning, every time he goes to bed. Last but not least, Smith was a murder mystery tale of sorts about a journalist trying to uncover the truth about decades-old killings, only to make the horrific discovery that the past is living on in the present. Pretty creepy stuff. And it's a shame more didn't survive, or audio recordings. As I mentioned earlier, the original camera scripts for all 7 episodes still exist, and are available in PDF format via the show's DVD release. Still photographs only exist for Bedtime and Death Cancels All Debts, leaving the visual presentation of the other episodes completely unknown, other than to those who were lucky enough to have seen them during their original broadcasts. All 3 episodes are available for free on YouTube, so if you don't have a stick up your ass, or you're not easily scared to the point that a cat would scare you if it looked at you funny, watch it, come tell me what you thought in the comments, and try and tell me it isn't a good old-fashioned modern ghost story. Stories, rather.
Very lonely women, husbands away all day, children at school. Change of life.
Thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe, and if you want more videos like this, then I'll make them. And if you don't want them, I'll make them anyway. How about that?